Okay, I'm here with Paolo at the Sonus Faber factory. Paolo, you're the lead designer for the Sonus Faber acoustic theme. Thank you for sitting with me. Tell me a little bit about your educational background. Did you study acoustics or engineering or?
Well, this is going to be a surprise for you because my background is psychology.
Psychology.
Yeah, that's what I did at university. But of course, quite obviously, I was an audiophile since my youngest age, and of course, when you are super young and you are an audiophile, you are moneyless, and so you have to find a way to live together with this passion without money, and the only solution is DIY,
Okay.
right? And so DIY was the beginning for me, but also I was used to work in a hi-fi retailer in my hometown, and I had the chance to meet the Sonus Faber product since when I was super young, and I fell in love with the brand.
So you've known about Sonus Faber
Yeah.
for many years.
Yeah. My first serious speaker was a pair of Concertino First Series, which I purchased back in 1995 because they were affordable to me at that time, and yes, this started it all. Then after some years, I went working for this retailer, and who was the guy who sold me the Concertino, but he opened his own shop in my hometown downtown, a lovely shop. And then he had a connection with the company, and he knew how much I love the company and I love the Sonus Faber product, so he arranged such a deal that I could go. He found a second-hand customer for my Concertino, and I grabbed a pair of Minima, which was a huge improvement, and I had the chance to come here, purchase them, and get them signed by Franco Serbia.
Oh.
Now the story is becoming long. To make it the shortest possible, after some years I did my own thing. I did psychology, particularly work psychology. And in order to get graduate, I had to spend 400 hours in any company, whatever. So I said to myself, well, let's try to see if the Sonus Faber, which I met a few years before, can allow me to do that. But my only expectation was, well, I have to do those boring 400 hours. Let's see if I can do them in a place I love. I sent a nice letter. I've been invited here. They remember perfectly about me. They were so nice, and they told me, listen, yes, we do that, but we don't want to do that just one shot. We want to be the opportunity to see if something more can happen. And at the time, Cesare Bevilacqua, who was the CEO of the company, had this vision long before I could even realize myself that I could do this job. And so I made these 400 hours. Then I was hired for 1 year. A lot of investment has been done to allow me to study the subject. Of course, I was thirsty to learn as much as I could because I was loving it. Was my toy, you know. In the while time, I got graduate, and I started to work here, which I've been lucky enough to teach a lot of electroacoustic, and my first important commitment was to take care about incoming and outgoing controls, quality controls on transducers, which meant understanding how to measure, how to double check, and stuff like that. And I've been lucky enough to have the chance that the company gave me the chance to learn something that I love, but also trusted my opinion all the time. And so I feel blessed about that.
So when you were doing this, you said they gave you the task to measure
Yeah.
incoming and outgoing. I presume they actually took you through a course or taught you what it is that you needed to learn or to know.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it was partially a learning by doing process in the beginning, but also when they saw I was pretty interested and things shaped a little bit better, one of the things they did for me was to let me attend to a course of created by the guys which are selling us the tools, the electroacoustic music, Audiomatica from Firenze, the Clio system. I spent several days, several weeks in Firenze, and one for 4 months for some time. Now I can't remember. It was long ago. And I learned how to use the tool and what really meant in acoustic, at least as a foundation of knowledge. And the rest was done by passion.
So when you were doing this, Franco was still here.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first
So-
2 years, Franco was here. Yeah.
Okay. And then at what point, Franco left, what year was that roughly?
Franco left in the summer of 2006.
2006. So when he left, who now took over the design responsibilities?
I did.
Oh, you did?
I did.
So straight from measuring
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
on, you went into design?
I entered the company a couple of years before,
Okay.
March 2004, and I started doing all these jobs. Basically, in the last year, half of my day was about taking care of incoming controls. Half of my day was about helping out Franco. So even if, in a very, how can I say, I don't know the word in English, but just helping out with the maximum amount of respect, so to say. I was there when Amati Anniversario and Guarneri Memento were done. And then it was really too early, but they put me in charge of R&D. My very first design was the Ellipsa, which was launched at CES of 2007. So I spent the second half of 2006 setting up my first design
How
for
did
the
you
company.
feel? Did you feel that you personally, did you feel competent and confident at that point? Or
No.
did you, no.
I was scared. It was a nightmare. I mean, it has been something like 3 months of sleepless night. Oh my God, oh my God. But luckily enough, at that point we hired a very important guy for the company, which is the engineer Umberto Nicolau, who really teach me a lot and was double checking what I was doing. When I said that I was lucky to have, the company believing in me, is that I was making the choices, but I had somebody double checking my choices. That was great, and I learned a lot from.
Now, before that, though, basically Franco did everything. He
Yeah.
conceived the product, he designed the product,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, everything, absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
he was a genius.
Wow. As you started developing and putting your stamp on the product, and you started to learn what you wanted and liked, how do you think you started differing, if in fact you did, from what Franco tended to head towards?
Oh, wow. Well, I still believe that I haven't moved away. I just improved his original vision, which I agreed to
And what would
in
that be?
first time.
What would that vision be?
The vision is that music reproduction, and this is something we even place in our brand manifesto, that you can read online, because we made a huge work this year thinking about who we are. And one of the core values of the brand is that music reproduction has to be natural, has not to be an artifact, has not to sound like an artifact, has to be listening fatigue free, like any good concert, particularly if acoustic is. You never get tired listening to live music, right? This has to happen the same, in exactly the same way when you listen to loudspeaker system. Of course, my contribution to improve this thing was, has been and still is about moving from something too much on the sweet side, too much slow, too much, I'll say, dull sometimes, into something that still keeps a natural feeling, but of course it is announced with speed, transparency, articulation, and a better music reproduction. But always having in mind that you don't have to get tired or get sick about that. Music reproduction has not to sound like an artifact in any way.
How do you know if you are moving closer to that goal rather than further away?
Well, I trust my feelings. I trust my listening abilities. I trust people surrounding me opinion. I trust feedbacks when they come from people which I recognize they are a reference. And also, what I think is my only real strength is that much before being an audiophile, I am a music lover. I'm more a music lover than an audiophile. So anytime I have the chance, I attend to live music. I was such in love with music that quite recently I felt the need to learn to play an instrument. It became to be a need. I'm an avid vinyl collector.
Mm-hmm.
I have not even more space in my house for vinyl, and I don't have the time to listen them all, unfortunately. But this is something stronger than me, and so this connection with music, this love, is the one that is the thing that I trust when it comes to my design. And then, of course, I was lucky enough to learn a lot of things about a lot of incredible people I worked with over all those years. Yeah, I have to credit Umberto Nicolau, Joseph Zal, Lorenzo Zhang, which is a retailer around here. I mean, I've been lucky enough to learn from a lot of amazing people.
Yeah, that's great because what you said earlier is that in general, most people are well versed with Sonus Faber, agree that where Franco's designs were unfailingly musical, they were also not the most neutral or transparent and so on, whereas your designs continue that musicality but have become far more neutral and far more transparent, and so in many respects it's in fact a better speaker that way, and
Thank you.
that was actually one of the reasons why it inspired me to want to talk to you. So along those lines, how do you decide what a new speaker should be? What starts that project? What is it inspired by?
Well, of course, over the years, there are some, how can I say? I heard a beautiful interview about the Pink Floyd and about David Gilmour and Nick Mason. They were talking about, that they made their last record a few years ago, and this record was mainly made out of previously recorded material, which they put together and rearranged somehow. And David Gilmour was used to say that this last record was kind of an homage to their whole career, because at the end of the day, they realized they have a certain amount of pattern of sounds.
Yes.
They always played with. It's the same. After some years, you realize that when you have to do a certain speaker playing that game in that category, you already know more or less what it has to be. And we know that mixing and matching the things we have, we can get the right kind of combination for that specific product. And then the last part, is arranging the sound best that it can, dealing with the budget, unfortunately, because you always have to deal with a budget.
So along those lines, yesterday during our meeting, you mentioned that when you first design something, you start with a design document brief. You design the drivers, the enclosure. You talk to Livio, you give him a design brief, and he designs his enclosure and so on. Then when the prototypes arrive, you guys actually come to this room,
Yeah.
right? And I'm going to pan this so that everybody can see. You come into this room, and right there, that famous spot there, you put that first speaker.
Yeah.
The first prototype. You assemble it all mechanically, and then you start measuring it for things like sensitivity and impedance and so on.
Impedance mainly in the
Right.
beginning.
Just to make sure that you have a general idea of what, in fact, your idea in your mind actually translates into a product. So now, after you've done that, after you've measured the impedance and so on, why exactly are you doing that? Why would you start with that as opposed to, as a lot of people will say, let's hear what it sounds like, because you've got that product now.
Well, because the first thing that I do is double checking and possibly improve the interaction between the transducer and its own seat, its own new house, which is the cabinet, right? So before doing anything else, I have to make sure that each transducer is in the perfect condition to work properly in the enclosure. I already know how the transducers I use are sounding. I already know because I developed the transducers in first place. Being them a new development or a previously available development, there's a different path which I haven't described particularly well yesterday about the development of the, so I already know how they sound. So when I approach the loudspeaker system thing, I first thing to do is to make sure that the relations, the new house of the transducer, so to say, is the right one, is perfect. Is, of course, before anything, I did some simulations, but I double check the real thing. I find out the right amount and the right kind of damping material. I adjust the ducts in order to make the system resonate the way I like. We have a special patent to do that, which is called self-reference. So this is the first thing. This is really the first thing.
Right. And then after that, you bring it into the anechoic chamber and you measure it. Now, at that point, you're measuring it, I guess, for
Acoustic.
acoustics.
Acoustic.
And then while you're doing that, I guess you're also tweaking with the crossover.
Yeah, now at that point, when I move from outside, where I'm doing the first thing I said, only by electric measurement, which are not affected by the environment, of course, then I move into the anechoic chamber. And I start to double check the acoustic and develop the crossover network. And the first stage is purely a measurement stage. I have a certain reference for frequency response that I have in mind. And I try out to see. We have our paracross topology, so I build the almost perfectly measurement crossover, so to say, and then I come out, and then I start to do the job like Franco was used to do, but I'm starting from a very solid foundation, because from a technical standpoint, I have double-checked the enclosure, I have double-checked resonance mode inside the enclosure, I have already a very nice measuring crossover network done, of axis response, everything double-checked in the anechoic chamber. So I start to play with it, taking measurement outside, which are not particularly reliable, but you can always double-check with a very perfect one previously done, and listening, getting the feeling. This is in this point. So, I mean, science is unavoidable. It is super important. Science is not everything. There's a step above, which is beyond science to me. And this is what this brand is about.
Okay, great. We're back with Paolo. Paolo, yesterday we stopped at a point where I wanted to ask you a little bit about the anechoic chamber. We had a chance to take a look at it. When was that installed?
It was installed and built and designed before, of course, back in 2014.
Okay. And as I understand it, you were saying that it's essentially certified from 100 hertz and up.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. This is of course to the dimensions, because the lower you want to go in frequency with an anechoic chamber, the bigger has to be, the taller has to be, particularly the absorbing materials, and of course you need wider dimension of the room itself. We thought that for our need, from 100 Hz and above in fully anechoic configuration was perfect, because typically one of the trickiest thing to do without an anechoic chamber is, whenever you're designing a three-way or three or more way, is the crossover point between woofers and mid-range, particularly if you do this crossover network pretty low in frequency like I like to do. Right there you absolutely need an anechoic chamber. But the beautiful thing is that it is a chamber which can be configured as a semi-anechoic. All the absorbing elements in the floor can be moved away very easily, and this is super interesting because you can do very precise measurements using techniques such as the ground plane. Right there you don't have any more the need to have the fully anechoic behavior. It's just a very absorbing room with this technique you can clearly understand what's going on in the very low frequencies.
One of the things you mentioned during a presentation to us 2 days ago was that the human hearing is not linear. We are not equally sensitive to different frequencies, and you cited in particular something, the Fletcher-Munson curve, for example, but you also mentioned that we are very sensitive, much more sensitive at middle and higher frequencies than we are, for example, in the bass. Can you go into a little bit of this?
Well, this is very simple. This is related to the struggle for survival that our kind is subject to since the beginning of times, I would say. So Fletcher and Munson curves, like several other more advanced experiments, are displaying that our hearing abilities is not linear at all. And just to give you some more detail, if you want to perceive at the same level different frequencies, you have, particularly if you take as a reference 1K, and say that you are using a few dBs, maybe 35 dBs at 1K, to perceive 40 Hz at the same level of that 1K at 40 dB, you have to boost 20 dB or something. And this is happening also in the wide, in the high frequency. While if you are always considering that 1K at 40 dB, you might find that in the range between 2K and 6K, you need just 30 to perceive the same level. What does it mean? It means that in that frequency we have super sensitive as human beings, and this is due to the fact that screams of the weakest of our kind are exactly in that range of frequencies. We are designed to help and to help out the weakest of our kind. And this is where the way our human hearing apparatus works comes from. There is also more. This becomes less and less critical. I mean, the amount of boost you have to apply at certain frequencies in order to perceive them at the same level changes if instead of having 1K at 40 dB, you have 1K at 80 dB. That changes a lot. You don't need that to boost that much, the low hand and the high hand, because again, this is how it works.
So let's say you're doing measurements, and hypothetically you have designed a speaker that measures perfectly flat all across the board at a steady state of 85, 83 decibels. And then you increase that to 90.
Yeah.
You're basically saying that our ear will not hear a flat frequency response even though it measures it flat.
Yeah, of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not, because our hearing is not a microphone.
Right.
It's something different,
So
more complicated.
So that leads me to the question. So how then do you, as a speaker designer, design something that sounds neutral and flat, even though it doesn't measure neutral and flat? What measurements do you then have to rely on besides?
Well, this is this is very simple. First of all, you have to take in account that on an average bass, the sound pressure level you can measure in any home listening session in the listening spot is around 70 dB, sometimes 80 when you're pushing very hard. Because each time you double the distance from the speaker, you are losing 6 dBs when it comes to lines, to point source speakers like the one we do. And so even if you play very loud, you will never exceed. So what happens with this sound pressure lever is a reference. What I do, I find my own way. I slightly de-emphasize the range between 2K and 6K. I always try to keep it lower than anything else. I try to stay very linear because also in other frequencies we learned by, I don't know how to say, maybe it's, but we learned that things has to be quite flat, right? So say that from 100 Hz up to 10K, I try to stay basically flat, not exactly, but basically flat. And then I boost a little bit the bottom hand and the low hand. Frequencies above and below are boosted a little bit in my tonal balance. And as a resulting effect, this kind of frequency response matches our hearing sensitivities. And therefore sounds natural. It's not only like that, because the choices you do in terms of diaphragm materials plays a big role in make you perceiving a sound natural. But an overall tonal balance shaped this way helps.
Many speaker manufacturers, especially in the very high end, choose to use exotic material. Well, not necessarily exotic, but the materials like aluminum or special synthetic materials and so on. You choose HDF. Why is that?
Well, basically saying that I choose HDF is kind of a limitation, because it really depends from the model and really depends from the kind of thing I'm trying to achieve, really depends from several things. HDF is one of the ingredients sometimes it's the main, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's just one of the several. F is, the best compromise. It's really the best compromise most of the times, because it has the right rigidity, and it is easy to work, which is super important when it comes to an industry at the same time. And pros and cons are very good. But of course, for us, for our history, wood is always the way to go, because this is where we come from. This is the way we approach from a philosophical standpoint the loudspeaker system. I mean that we always think about the loudspeaker system as a music instrument somehow. Of course, saying this and you can't obviously say that a loudspeaker system is a music instrument, but I make you an example. Yesterday I mentioned that I play the bass, right? And one of the most famous electric basses is the jazz bass. And it is very interesting to notice how much different sounds jazz bass is built in the 60s and jazz bass built in the 70s. They have a totally different sound. And this is due to a very simple, same pickup, same strings, everything. What changes is just the material of the fingerboard and the material of the solid body. When we were in the 60s, the fingerboard was made out of rosewood into a maple neck, and you have an alder body, which has the tendency to resonate in a certain way. It is the overall combination provides a warmer sound. The same exact bass in the 70s was mainly done with the maple fingerboard, so it was a one-piece maple neck, and it was an ash body. And the same bass was sounding more etchy, more on the treble, which made the 70s jazz bass perfect for funk music and for slap. So, believe it or not, wood has an impact. Wood is a living material. Wood, any different wood resonates in a certain way. And this is where we come from. Over the years, we also learned that if you really want to enhance the performance at the maximum level, using wood, which means keeping the Sonus Faber tone, combined with other materials such as aluminium, you can get the best of both worlds, because you enhance the cabinet performance without removing the wood flavor.
I believe you first introduced the concept or the technology of the anime legato
Yeah.
in the Sonus Faber back around 2010.
Yes.
What gave you the inspiration for that? Because as far as I know, I had never seen a speaker previously that used something like that.
It was very simple. It was very simple. And it's very connected to the things I was explaining right now. At that time, we were designing the Sonus Faber speaker, which was something light years away from everything Sonus Faber did before. It was really an extreme design with amazingly powerful transducers, amazingly powerful drivers, particularly for the bass. And we thought that such a power couldn't, or we were afraid that such a power couldn't be perfectly managed by a wooden structure only. So I came with this idea to use, I don't know the word in English unfortunately, but you know the kind of tool that you normally use to keep something fixed, and then maybe you are drilling it, or you are, I don't know the name of that tool, but it's just clamping from top and bottom something. And this is the idea I came with at the time. Let's clamp the best wooden structure that we can, so to make it stronger, to make it more powerful, more able to handle high amount of energy. That's where the idea came from.
Okay.
And they are two connected together, and they are tightened from the bottom, right?
And then what do you call the device that is that rod with
The anima legata is the name of the rod connecting
Oh, I see.
the two pieces. Sometimes there's a rod inside. Sometimes the same job is done into the back of the speaker. If you look at the Amari, you don't have an anima legata inside, because the job is done by the metal parts connecting the two parts together,
Like a
top and
brace.
bottom.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. And you also you also make use in other cases of mass dampers, sort
Yeah.
of like round discs
Yeah.
that are attached. And is that part of the same idea of trying to reduce cabinet vibrations?
No. Yes and no. The point is that we use the tuner mass damper. You might have noticed, or if you don't, I'd like to underline this. Tuner mass damper is used only when we have certain kind of decoupling of the speakers from the floor. We don't use mass damper when we have spikes. Because so it works perfectly in conjunction with the zero vibration system we developed. Again, the Sonus Faber was the moment where we came up with these ideas, and which became trademark technologies over time. We kept improving them over time. And it's about realizing that if you want to enhance the music reproduction, you have to take care about not only the best sound reproduction, but the best silence reproduction as well. So possibly you want your loudspeaker system not creating any kind of acoustic dirtiness into your listening room. The only way to do that is avoid the vibration transmission from the speakers to the floor and then to the environment, having certain frequencies, particularly avoiding transmission of certain frequencies. The zero vibration transmission is about decoupling the speaker from the floor in order to guarantee that the speaker is not providing dirtiness to the listening environment. In theory, spikes are doing the opposite, are letting all the vibrations created inside the speakers going into the listening room. But in fact, spikes would be the perfect solution only if the speaker was laying into a huge decoupled mass from the listening room, which unfortunately is not happening. But this is why, for instance, sometimes when it comes to spike, we were used to suggest to put a huge piece of stone under the speakers with the sound decoupling material underneath. That would be the perfect solution when you have just a spike speaker. Of course, it is always good to avoid the loudspeaker system keeping the vibration produced by the mechanical work of the transducers, and using the spike to let those vibrations go away. But if you want to reach the highest level, you want to avoid those vibrations to travel into the listening room. So you have to decouple the speakers and avoiding with a zero vibration transmission the transmission of certain vibration having certain frequencies. And this is done, basically this technology is about understanding the weight of the speakers and providing the right compliance.
It's really the first time I've heard anybody articulate this well and carefully, because traditionally, as you know, almost everybody basically says spike it.
Yeah, but that would be good if you have a decoupled mass where the spikes are laying on.
Yes.
But most of the people don't.
Yeah.
Of course, it is the perfect solution to avoid the vibration staying inside of the speaker. But when you have the budget or you have the solution to do something like we do, you keep the listening environment acoustically clean, but unfortunately, those vibrations stays inside of the speaker, which, as I say, is very bad, unless you have a tuned mass damper. So this is what the suspending masses are for. They are calculated in order to oscillate in antiphase with the vibration inside of the speakers, and they dissipate those vibrations, transforming them into heat. So the suspended mass inside the speakers have sense only when they are combined with the zero vibration transmission technology.
Understood. Thank you for clearing that up. We get to the drivers now. There are literally hundreds of drivers available from great manufacturers, and
of course,
early on you were using those. At some point you decided to design your own. How long have you been designing your own drivers, and why take that step?
Well, it sort of came out naturally over years. There was not really a turning point, I would say. Or at least my work in electroacoustics started like that somehow, because the first job I did for the Ellipsa at that time was more about customizing existing drivers rather than designing our own ones. But and it was coming from a marketing need, which I've been told. So together with Scanspeak, I realized the Ellipsa, or the Cremona M line mid-range mid-woofer, which was a customized version of an off-the-shelf available Scanspeak transducer. And it was customized cosmetically, but also it was customized in order to try to improve a little bit the transparency, paying a little bit of prices which were manageable with the crossover network. So this was the starting moment when we started somehow to customize more and more of the shelf transducer. And after a while we learned how to do things our own way. I guess that the very first Sonus Faber design loudspeaker was the original AIDA mid-range. That was really unique. That was the first time when we designed something from scratch.
So 2011.
Yeah, 2011. And then a key turning point has been the Olympica line, because right there the same things we learned with the AIDA were applied into, the original AIDA was interesting also for the woofers. They were not completely customized, but they had already strong ideas coming from us. But the Olympica line, this is exactly when we moved completely away from off-the-shelf transducers. And from that moment on, we never moved back.
For better or for worse, many, including press, believe that silk is an inferior material for tweeter in particular. Yet, Sonus Faber has mostly used silk, as far as I can
Yeah,
remember.
I would say almost only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why the choice of silk? And in fact, ironically enough, it's in the recent past that we start seeing manufacturers going back to silk.
Yeah,
Why silk?
because it sounds natural.
Ah,
Very simple as that. It sounds natural. It sounds more natural than any other materials to my ears and to our ears.
and yet you've
And,
experimented and you've played with beryllium.
Yeah, of course. So
Yeah.
we are proud to be the very first to introduce into the market a beryllium diaphragm with diamond-like carbon deposition on top, which is a very expensive and a little bit dangerous process to do diaphragm. And basically that process, without going too complicated, is able to change a little bit the structure and raise a little bit the natural resonance frequency in the high frequencies, normally affecting a beryllium diaphragms. And in this way, a beryllium diaphragm which has, for instance, properties such as an amazing microdynamic, stuff like that, is able to sound much less like metal, which is something we always recognize in our listening session. But a very good silk treated the old way with the right coating materials applied by the right hands is still the best solution for high frequencies. And our DAD technology is the key element to enhance the performance.
So since you brought it up, can you elaborate what DAD or damped apex dome actually does?
Yeah, of course. Little bit of background before. Until the end of the 90s, in Sonus Faber, we were using traditional dome tweeters, right? And the beautiful properties of a dome tweeter is, in my opinion, and this is not particularly related to the materials, even if certain shapes normally done or at the time done out of silk, of coated silk or coated fabric, are able to provide an amazing performance in the off-axis response. You have a very good 30 degrees off-axis, 45 degrees off-axis response. You have a lot of energy right there. And this is super important in my opinion because this energy is a huge contribution to one of the most beautiful magic in all music reproduction. And I'm talking about the speaker disappearing from the stage and letting space to music. This is what we want to achieve. Unfortunately, when you start to search for precision, what happens is that a soft dome tweeter lacks to reach the highest possible frequencies due to the fact that coating can improve this, of course, but generally speaking, the apex of the dome have the tendency to behave in antiphase with the other surfaces of the dome. And this, unfortunately, is resulting in a cancellation at a very high frequency. That's why, if you look at the dome frequency response, you quite often see a drop earlier than 20K. So, in order to improve this, Franco, in a certain moment, the beginning of, after the 90s, he moved into the ring tweeters. And the ring tweeters, due to their construction, they were still using the same kind of silk. Due to their construction, they were, and due to the fact that a tiny phase plug exactly in the middle, they were able to perfectly extend in the high frequencies to go much up above 20K. And this was beautiful. On the other hand, unfortunately, the speakers started to sound a little bit less magic due to the fact that they are terrible performing in off-axis. They're really terrible off-axis. They lack energy. So, after a while, I wanted to bring back that magic, and I get some criticism. I was criticized because I moved back to the soft dome. Because if I have to trade, I prefer not to extend perfectly in the very high frequency, but to have this, this huge amount of acoustic energy spread in the high frequencies by the tweeter. But after a while, I also realized that we could do things. And when we realized that the problem was on the dome, we started, in the beginning, we started to play with backside coating inside of the diaphragm. And to add more coating, a lot of more coating in the apex of the dome internally compared to the other surface in order to make it stiffer. And that helped a lot. And then we also thought, but why don't we damp mechanically that surface? We tried it out. I guess I have the very first prototype. This is unbelievable. This is the very first prototype of the DAD tweeter. And we see a huge improvement, and we say, okay, let's do it.
So that was a stroke of genius.
Yeah.
The innovation that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Wow. And you've trademarked it, I hope.
Yeah, of course.
Uh,
So you have the best of both worlds, basically,
Yes.
very clearly.
I realized that more and more Sonus Faber now talks about the crossover, whereas before he really didn't say very much. Again, we're talking quite a few years ago.
Well, it's not true. In the beginning, there was a huge communication. At least in Italy, I don't know if this communication was spread over the world. But in the beginning, Franco was very proud of his very simple crossover network, and he was going most of the time, anytime he could, with first order designs.
How has that changed?
Well, first of all, you have to be very lucky with phase combination between transducers, and this is kind of unpredictable, at least in my experience. Sometimes it works perfectly, sometimes it doesn't. So it's very hard to get a good result. But also, even if I recognize such an approach as a distinctive sound, which is very sweet and warm, is very immediate because you don't have, you have a minimal amount of reactive components into the signal path. But the price you have to pay is high distortion, is lack of speed, is phase problems, particularly when you move off axis. So at the end of the day, we found a way to make our speaker sounds natural without compromising with that. I mean, if the crossover network is designed properly, you don't have to worry about that. I mean, of course, when I say design properly, I mean to use the minimum amount of component necessary.
So is it typically a third order?
Well, depends. No, it's not. It's not.
Okay.
It's not. Well, basically, it is still a first order. Anytime I'm dealing with the mid frequency transducer, so my mid-ranges are always a pure first order bandpass, or when it comes to wave design, is the first order slope mid woofer. So you have just one relative components in series to the signal, and because you know, I'm thinking about to the speaker almost like a monoway design. So I really focus and put a lot of care in designing a very strong, sweet-sounding mid-band transducer, and I make this transducer do most of the job. Woofers and tweeters are just completing. I also want transducer doing most of the job because this is also helping the natural feeling. If you pay attention, and if the crossover network is done properly, you can detect by hearing that something's going on in the crossover frequency or in the crossover region. I want to avoid that. I want to keep one transducer doing most of the job, particularly when it comes to human voices. And to do that, and I go always with very gentle slopes. But I do a lot of compensations in parallel, which helps avoiding distortion problems, or which helps a lot controlling. And then I add third, fourth order sometimes things in top and bottom, so that I have the speed, I have the articulation, I have the control, I have the lowest possible amount of distortions, and this is my way of doing things. So it's not just one order, just anyway has his own, so to say.
Let's move to the 35th anniversary. Sonus Faber celebrates its 35th anniversary this year. Earlier in our conversation, you spoke very respectfully and with great love and admiration for the founder, Franco Serblin. Which models did you introduce to celebrate the company's 35th anniversary?
Well, we just picked one of the most iconic of the ultra classic design from the past, which was the Electa Amateur. The Electa Amateur is the most iconic because few people know this, but it was the very first international success of the company. The company was founded back in 1983, and the speakers came out back in 1987, 4 or 5 years after. And it has been the very first speakers widely exported by the company, particularly in Japan. They have an amazing success in Japan. Speakers before were, the market was mainly, if not only, Italy. With that speaker, international market became a matter of fact for the company. So it has been very popular. And it's not the Extrema, which was strange by his own. It's just the most iconic traditional Sonus Faber speaker. And we just made, we thought it was nice to celebrate this birthday, making a reinterpretation of that speaker. So it is the techniques and the materials used at that time, but there's the today knowledge. So I guess it is an interesting combination. More, they are slightly different also from the tonal balance perspective. They are not the today Sonus Faber tonal balance. They try to go a little bit back, also with the tonal balance. They are not as linear. My speakers are never linear, but they are not as linear as my recent design are. They are a little bit more smiling mouth kind of frequency response, which was the things that Franco was doing back in the days.
Okay. The other thing I found by accident is that you're reintroducing the Sonus Faber.
Yeah.
Tell me more about it. This was the mythical speaker that you could read about, that the few lucky reviewers who saw, heard it, spoke with almost hushed tones that they had been to Mount Olympus, but almost nobody else had ever seen or heard. What was the decision that brought it back, and what have you done to quote unquote renew it, update it, etc.?
Wow, this is an interesting question. It just happened, I would say, without a proper intention. It just happened that we started to receive a lot of requests to have this Sonus Faber done back again by a particular distributor, which I won't mention. And after a while, okay, let's do a couple of pairs. And even if most of the materials used right there were the pinnacle, still are the pinnacle, the experience that we grow it over the years was much improved. And also we had some crazy materials. And also this Sonus Faber speaker, for us, always been like, how can I say, kind of a training ground. This is the place where we experiment. This is the place where we really think out of the box, and where we do experience with which then are turning into trademark solutions, for instance. It happens quite a lot. So we said, well, let's do it special. So I completely redesigned the crossover network. I felt that particularly the way I managed the woofer was improvable. Was definitely improvable. Also, we had a better mid-range, much better mid-range. I have to say that, sorry, the Sonus Faber mid-range was the very first design Sonus Faber transducer. Not the other one was the second. Sorry, it was the Sonus Faber. But in fact, we had the 7th generation now, so we placed a better mid-range. And then we thought, well, we did this. It's a crazy speaker. We did this crazy tweeter design. Let's use the crazy tweeter design on this crazy speaker. And what happened is that basically they like it a lot, and they turned into an available product by request. It has been super interesting. And when you are playing with 115-inch and couple of 10-inch, all in the same speaker, wow, it's fun.
That's one way to put it. Rob Report in 2011 named it the finest speaker of the year, possibly ever, and that's quite an amazing thing, given that they're basically reporting on the very finest of anything and everything. So, quick last few questions. Name some companies whose speakers you admire that you think, wow, that's a really good design.
Well, I have several, but they're not coming from our age most of the time, or sometimes yes. But I always been a huge fan of Pro AC, England. Their design from the 80s and the 90s were amazing. I mean, Stuart Tyler is great. He's a great electroacoustic designer. Of course, Lawrence Dickey and the Nautilus. I mean, I still remember the first time I heard the original Nautilus. It was a shocking experience. This has been among the few listening experiences that really made me fall in love with this game. And it was 22 years ago. It was my first audio show. I was in my early 20s, and wow, it was a massive system with Jeff Rowland amplification, Jadi preamp, and this pair of Nautilus was wow. It was amazing. It was a VPI top of the line turntable. And another crazy experience has been exactly with the other brand I just mentioned, Pro AC, which was about Nelson Pass amplifier, clear audio top of the line turntable. Those two systems kind of shocked me. But there are some others. If we move talking about different technologies, the big system from MBL is among my favorite. Really, wow. Unbelievable. What else? Magnepan has always been speakers.
Livio has a pair.
Yeah, I know.
Do you ever feel like throwing it out
No.
when he's not there?
No. Okay. The other models, I don't know, for some reason, no. But Woodbuck P7, Woodbuck P6, that generation was beautiful to me. I have beautiful memories. Yeah, those are the ones that comes to my mind. I like ATC speakers quite a lot. I like ATC speakers from UK. Of course, the 3/5 is an obvious thing to mention. Yeah, the Yamaha 1000, the Yamaha 1000. Of course, this is another speaker, totally different, which I love. Those are more or less the speakers I really admire.
Okay, Ferrari or Tesla?
Ferrari.
Tubes or transistors?
depends.
Cop out. Jeff Buckley or Katie Lang's version of Hallelujah?
Jeff Buckley.
Good choice. Lennon or McCartney?
George Harrison.
Thank you.
You're welcome.